What really makes someone hot? Science explains. So we're going to break down what makes a man or a woman hot these days. And I say these days because I guess from generation to generation it changes. Now, what we're going to talk about today in our Wellness Week episode is, by the way, I'm DJ Tony. I'm your host. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Just don't be a strunt. Like and subscribe. So now what we're talking about is just visual. We're not talking about, hey, the person's soul or a good person. That's what matters. Of course, when you get to know someone, the real hotness about a man or a woman is intellect, right? How you get along with them, the connection with your soul, your spirit, your intellect. That's what really is the quote unquote true hotness after the first couple of days. But we're just talking about superficial, just visuals. Now, I get it. You think that somebody with pus coming out of their head and one eyeball and scars and scabs, you think that's hot. God bless. Then it's hot for you. We're talking about the majority of human beings in America, because it does kind of change, vary a little bit from country to country. But, in our society, what is hot, what is not. So just talking visual only, okay? So facial symmetry, okay? Now, I joked about an eyeball before, you having one eyeball, but if you have an eyeball that's here and another eyeball that's here, that's not going to work. That's asymmetrical. So symmetry. Eyeballs are in the, top portion of your head. Now, here's the funny thing about eyeballs. You have to be able to see your eyeballs too. You can't have two little, pinholes for eyes. That's not going to work. And your eyes can't be so big where you look like a Martian. They have to have symmetry, but they can't be too big, not too small. You have to be able to see the color of the eye. And nice eye color helps. Again, none of these are end all be all, but as a conglomerate together, they make someone hot or not. So that's the eyes, right? Eyebrows. You want to have eyebrows. I mean, if you don't, it's not, again, none of these by themselves is a killer or a deal breaker, but as a conglomerate together. So that's the eyes, right? You want to have eyelashes, usually for a woman, right? We like eyelashes, typically. Okay. Okay, that's the eyes. Clear skin, right? If you have pizza on your face and you look like you just got hit by a Mack truck and your face is on flames, most people don't think that's hot. I'm sure you know someone that does, but majority of people like clear skin. Doesn't matter the age, but you can't have, pussing scars, scabs. Like that's not going to work out. So no one's saying if they have perfect skin, but usually men and women, they look for a sign of you're healthy. You're not going to die today. Good skin health, good skin hygiene. You wash your face, you take care of the pimples or whatever. And we get it. Everyone has pimples here and there once in a while or a blemish or whatever. But generally speaking, it should look like, okay, this person is not dying. You know what I mean? Facial averageness. What does that mean? Faces that are closer to the average portions of the populations tend to be rated as more attractive. So you don't want to be on an extreme. You don't want to have a face that's like, oh, I've never seen that type of face before, good or bad. You want to be somewhere in the middle because people like birds of a feather flock together. You want to kind of, not be too extreme. So either way, left or right, up or down. Youthful cues. You want to have smooth skin, bright eyes, that matters. Again, we're not talking about personality, just the visuals. So that's kind of the face, right? I will also say nose, right? Going back to having an average. You don't want to have a huge nose. You don't want to have a small nose, something that's proportional actually to your head. So if you have a big head, you don't want to have a even bigger nose or a huge head and a tiny nose, but a smallish nose. Lips, I would say, generally speaking, men love women that have full lips. Now we're not talking about duck implants, but you can see the bottom lip, top lip. Men, we could probably get away with just a slit in our head, but women typically, men want to see the lips. Again, generally speaking, you want to have some kind of fullness or like that, right? Chin. I know for women, typically men like a woman with a narrowish chin. This is where I get screwed. But women like a man with a more chiseled, squared off chin. Okay. Generally speaking, you don't want it so squared off where you look like Jay Leno, but you don't want it so narrow where you look like, a hypodermic needle, but a squared off chin. I would say hair, obviously, if you have hair, meaning trim it, don't have nose hair shooting out, don't have hair coming out of your ears, have grooming, don't have bushy eyebrows, have grooming. If you hair on the head, I think generally speaking, most people like to see, especially men, they want a woman with hair on their head. Now, us guys, we can get away with the bald look typically, but I think women, if they had their way, most women, not all, but most women want a guy with a full head of hair. I get it. People think pitbull's hot. Some women like my baldness, but usually hair. Ears, you can't have Dumbo ears, that are 95 times the size of your head. You don't want tiny ears either, proportional, probably on a little bit of smaller side. So that's just you know, the visual there. And again, you being symmetrical. I can't have one ear up here and one ear down here. They should be symmetrical. So we want symmetry, symmetry, symmetry. That's all. That's what is a big telltale sign of what's hot, what's not. The other thing is, I don't think a person's face can be smooshed in concave and can't be bulging out either. It has to be, again, kind of an average where your face doesn't protrude out so much like a horse, but it's not so concave in like someone just bashed your head in. So there has to be a variant that's generally within the general parameters of what the average population has. Okay. Now, body, excuse me 1 second, please. Body, we don't want. Nobody wants somebody who's 900 pounds, right? Come on, let's be honest. But you also don't want somebody who's 50 pounds. You don't want to look like you're dying either way. I think women tend to like a man who is in shape. That's relative. As long as you're not 900 pounds, you're going to gas out going up one step. Again, you want to show some type of health, generally speaking, and there's variation there, right? So if you look healthy, but you got a few pounds extra, that's fine. And if you a few pounds underweight, that's fine. If you look toned, excellent. But if you have on extremes, right? If you have muscles on top of muscles and muscles and muscles and you're 1% body fat, most women don't find that attractive. Most women want a guy who's in shape, but not like, oh my God, you look like a horse. Like that's an extreme. And I get it. There's women who like that, but most don't. This is about the majority. And I think men want a woman that has hips, curves. Now, again, that's relative, how curvy and how hippie, but generally speaking, a general hourglass shape, not pencil shape, generally speaking. A hair and grooming, right? Talked about that. Most men like a feminine woman, dress, makeup, generally speaking. Most women want a man who, is tall or than them, has some physical fitness to them. We're not talking about money yet, it's just visual. Now, we're not considering the gay population. That can vary also in its own way, but we're just talking about your standard kind of heterosexual. Height, again, taller, the better for men. Shorter, the better for women. I know women who are like 6'5", they have a hard time dating, and they're stunning, they're gorgeous, but, so shorter for women, taller for men. Facial features, we talked about the jawline, pronounced cheekbones, a little bit of stubble sometimes is good. Women tend to prefer more masculine faces during ovulation, they say. Other factors, style, grooming. We talked about grooming a little bit before. Having clean face and, shower, don't smell like shit. How your posture, sitting up straight, not slouching. These are small ones, but clothing that fits, not too tight, not too baggy. Having some style that you kind of fit into the population. You're not too extreme either way. Confidence, how you walk, how you stand. Now, cultural influence matters here. Some places prefer more curvaceous women, some less, so different parts of the world have different types of shapes to women and men. Beards can be hot in certain places of the world and not in other places, again, generally speaking. So that's what makes hot. That's what makes not. Tell me what you think. Perfumes, even colognes, possibly. But I think generally speaking, yeah, the high cheekbone for the man, and for the woman to some extent, chiseled jaw, somewhat in tone shaped body. You don't look like a slob. You're not too skinny. You're not too muscular. You're not morbidly obese, and you're not morbidly underfed. So there's that kind of midway point that you have to stay within to be hot or not. Again, these are studies. They're not my opinion. What I find attractive, you may not. I mean, hey, I think it's great if you've got pus coming out of your head and you're 900 pounds. That's hot. You know what I mean? But that's me. So you have to do what you think, But yeah, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Thanks. Bye.